A little shout out to Kamikaze. If you are interested in getting any of Erica's many, many books, she is a multiple Eisner winner. So if you're looking for Squirrel Girl, Assassination, or her upcoming book, I think it's called, watch my Dracula Mother Effer, right?
That's close enough, yeah.
Yeah.
You get the gist of it.
You can contact Kamikaze at Steve at kamikaze.com, or give them a call. They stock all of her books, so you can definitely get them for you. They're doing deliveries, and the store is set up to make sure that everyone has a safe shopping experience during COVID. And the last thing is a little plug for the Ladies of Comicazi ourselves. We run events all year long. So please check out our website, www.ladiesofcomicazi.com, see what we're up to, and join us. So without further ado, I'm super excited to introduce Erica Henderson.
Hi, thanks, Valerie. That was great. I'm always happy to not have to introduce myself, so I can just get right into it. All right, so basically, I've been doing more teaching lately, thinking about how comics have been constructed, and then this summer have found myself doing a lot more writing, which has been an interesting challenge because I wasn't doing any writing at all, and then I went to, suddenly I'm like rewriting a 150-page graphic novel, and I had to write a couple of short stories, and it trial by fire. So I thought I would share some of what I've been learning in my horrible, horrible trials. The first thing that's interesting thinking about writing for comics is the idea of writing versus authorship. Because generally, when someone's just writing a book, they're writing, they have written the book, they are the author of the book, and that is a prose book. And anyone who's been on Twitter has seen all of the arguments about what an artist's role is in a comic. And obviously, I come from a biased position here, but this is from the perspective of an artist. So you're going to get that biased position. The artist in a comic is an author because the text only tells you so much information. Generally, it's just dialogue and some narration, and then other parts of the storytelling, the acting, what the characters look like, where they are in their lives based on how they're dressed, where they live, etc. That's generally visual. It would be weird to have that in the text while looking at a person who looks a certain way. So thinking about writing, you're dealing with the other parts of it. It's the dialogue, it's what happens moment to moment in the story. It's the overarching, it's the overarching plot, and also thinking about those other little details constantly, because coming from the artist perspective, it's hard to not always visualize it, which is an interesting thing to get around in your head. So next, I just want to break down the different ways that generally artists deal with writing, because even if you're not doing the writing yourself, you're still working with writing and making a book. So the first, which is the most common with work for hire, is the artist as an artist. So you're given a script, you're basically just reading it and then filling in the rest of the story beyond what's in there, and also making it so that what's there can be understood visually. So, the description of a town, that's not going to be in the book. You decide on that town, and you decide on all these little details, but the plot, the dialogue, that's all there. Next, you get into deeper and deeper collaborations. So then you have artist also as editor, where you're looking at what's in front of you and you're like, okay, this doesn't quite work. I can see what you want it to look like, and I need to figure out how to make this work visually, because that's my job. My job is to interpret what's here, and what's written down I can understand but doesn't make sense. So like an example is writing a panel as if it were an entire scene. So let's take like a famous movie scene, so we all know what it looks like. So let's say Darth Vader, I'm your father, that bit. So it's if someone wrote one panel with Vader cutting off Luke's hand, Luke falling, and the I'm your father, no. Like, that's several actions, but sometimes you'll just get that. You need to say, okay, it's my job to know what this is supposed to look like, and I'm gonna do that, and that's fine. That's fine. Next is artist as co-writer. So you're also there plotting out the story. I did both editor and co-writer a lot with Squirrel Girl. Ryan and I would like talk about stuff. We'd figure out plot in advance, and then he would come back to me with a script, and I'd go back in and say like, okay, I need to make this scene a little different over here. But yeah, generally with that kind of work for hire stuff, there's that separation, even if you're figuring it out together beforehand. And then the lastly is artist as writer, which is where you get into like the having to do it yourself, which it's a lot, man. That stuff's a lot. It's just a whole different way of thinking about what you're doing. I mean, obviously, having someone give you something and you coming up with it yourself are going to be two different things, but it's trying to, when you think of things visually, getting those ideas down, but also knowing that you have to think about it visually because it's a visual medium. It's tricky. I know I've done this for some of the shorter works. I know a lot of artists who do this for entire books where as they write each page, they'll lay it out so you know what it looks like. You're not putting in too many panels, it all works. And it's a lot of work. It's a lot to put down. So for me, there's a constant back and forth trying to think about what it means to write for something where most of what I'm writing isn't going to necessarily be on the page, but you're still having to, you're generally still working with editors and whatnot. If you're doing it for yourself, like who cares how you do it? You're doing it for yourself. But you still have to show it to someone else and have all this description because you're not going to draw it before someone's made their edits. So there's just this whole process of trying to get your visual ideas across to someone who you're then trying to understand these visuals, but you have to do it in text before you do the visuals, and it's a nightmare. It's the worst. So some of the things that I realized when I started doing all this writing every day was how, like, the ways it's different. Like, visually from, 20 yards away, it essentially looks the same. An artist and a writer, you're just sitting at a table hunched over, hurting your back. But once you get into it, one of the things I never understood, because I'm not like this at all. I feel like most of the artists I've talked to aren't like this. So I always thought about how Stephen King wrote that he would lock himself in one room for 8 hours a day and then just come out after 8 hours, and he would just be alone in silence. And when I'm drawing, I can't have that. I need something happening. And now that I've started writing, I get it. It's, you need that quiet, you need all these distractions out of the way. And it's difficult making that transition because I'm so used to having the distraction that suddenly not having the distraction feels weird and distracting, even though I know that if they're there, I won't be able to do the thing. So that has been a difficult transition. The other part is how much of writing involves thinking about what you're going to write. So when I'm drawing, and I think with most people as well, if you're working out ideas, you're doing something. You're moving your hands, you're looking up reference, you're going through books. A lot of times that process in writing involves either reading a book or just sitting there staring at nothing while you think about the books you've read. And it's going from one to the other is incredibly frustrating because you know that you're doing something, but you feel like you're not doing anything. And it's okay because you are. You need to come up with the ideas somehow. And that's just how it has to happen. I mean, maybe not for everybody, but for me and writers I've talked to in my frustration dealing with this. And that's the next part is, it's interesting coming up with the ideas. For some reason, it's so much easier when you get to talk them out. Even if the other person's not responding, there's something about just engaging with someone or just saying your ideas out loud where you can be like, oh, that's the next step. Because there's, as much as you need that distraction-free environment, as much as you need that time where you're in your own head, at a certain point, being inside your own head isn't useful. It's just this balancing act where you just need to have a sounding board and just to talk stuff out. And apparently all the writers I know have the same situation where sometimes you just need to just talk at a person and they don't even have to do anything. You just need to have them sit there while you just rattle off some things at their face. And beyond that, sometimes, and this is true for art as well, you just need to not do it. The part about being inside your own head and having all that quiet can be deafening, and you just need to leave that. And you just need to find ways to rework your thinking if you're stuck in those moments. For me, I just do something else that requires no thought. I'll like clean something, or I'll start on my next project. Like I'll just think about, what is it that, sorry, I went on a tangent. I'll like just do some other project that doesn't require thought. Like I've been sewing a lot, so I'll just start cutting out fabric. I'm just looking at a pattern and I'm cutting, and hopefully I can trick my brain to thinking about things differently. And just starting with writing in general when it's not what you're used to can be difficult, because it's like, oh, I need to make a thing. It can be any kind of thing. And then you're just blank. You have the blank page. And a bit of advice, something that's helped me out coming up with ideas, is just starting with autobiographical works. The way I described it before was you don't have to write anything. The story is all there because you've experienced it. So you're just editing. You're finding the points in the story that are interesting and you're writing that down. And it's just been good practice. I used to do it a lot in college. I would do a short 1-page comic like every day for, I think I did it for like a year. And then after that, it's had too much work to do. But it's super helpful getting started. And I stopped doing it for a long time. Now I'm back on, not every day because I don't have that kind of time, but just doing more of it and getting into the habit of writing down ideas, getting into the habit of putting those ideas on the page. It's like, you know, things pop up in your head all the time. And you just, instead of forgetting about it, just write it down. Like when people write down their dreams after they've woken up, hopefully it'll make more sense than that. But just scrawl it down. At some point later, you may come back to it, or you may never ever need it again. But now it's there and you can use that stuff. Just anything that happens in your life, it's a thing you can use. Just steal it. Actually, are there any questions? We can take some questions at this point. It's a good pause point. Okay, I don't know if Tracy, I don't know who's here.
Sorry, we had to do a little switching. I don't think there are any questions yet, so I don't know if you're at a point where you can keep going, but this is a good time to remind people that they can put questions into the chat at any time, and then we'll get them to you.
All right. Yeah, so the challenge of writing coming from art has, I mean, largely it's been just that shift in thinking and just dealing with I've been doing comics for so long at this point that part of my brain's like, yeah, you're doing comics. You've been doing this for probably a decade. This should be easy. But really, it's the complete opposite side that I'm not used to working on at all. And so it's just this constant headache of, I should be good at this. And then, oh no, wait, you never do this. This is brand new. And now you're doing it all the time. It's terrible. All right, I'm gonna look at my notes.
I have a question now if you want it.
Sure.
So someone asked, what sort of conversations do artists and writers have? As a follow-up, do you talk about pairing, where the focus is, colors, theme, those kinds of things?
That really changes from what writer I'm dealing with, because some of them are just more visually minded than others. And part of that's just knowing who your writing partner is. So for Squirrel Girl, Ryan generally didn't have a lot of visuals that he would think about. And so when we talk, it's largely about just story and how that would work. But then for my new Dracula mother effer story. Alex DeCampi she completely understands that side of it. The visuals of 70s culture, 70s pop art, all of that stuff was really big in the script. And so that's definitely like down to the collaborator and what the collaborator wants to do, or just what they're interested in thinking about. There's just some people, you know, they're interested in the story, but that other stuff's just not there for them. And then that's your job to figure it out. Whereas other people, you can talk about like, oh, I like the look of this kind of thing and that kind of thing. And you can go back and forth further in that direction. But yeah, that's like really down person to person. And I like both, because I like both as long as the person you're dealing with knows what they're talking about in both categories, right? Like if you have someone who's demanding certain looks, but they just don't know why, and they're like, it's cool, that's annoying. But if there's someone who really knows like this visual sense, like Alex was a director for a while. So like part of her scripts even involved certain kinds of camera angles and things like that, and certain kinds of lighting, because that's how her brain works, which was very cool. It's also cool because being a collaborative process, she was like, it doesn't have to be like this. This is how I'm seeing it. And that's always been an important part of collaboration for me with comics. It's like, well, I'm the one dealing with the art side, so we can talk about this, but ultimately, if I'm doing something a certain way, I have a reason for it. And if you're gonna fight me, I need you to come with ammunition.
I have a couple more questions, actually, if you want to keep going on questions,
Yeah, sure.
Or did you want to go back to your presentation?
Oh, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, let's keep going.
So has your creative process changed over time for art or writing or both?
Well, writing is fairly new for me, but it has changed a bit. So like I said, I used to, when I was writing anything, and generally I was writing fairly short stories. Like the longest thing I wrote up until this rewrite I'm doing right now was maybe 13 pages for a little thing for myself. And the other two things were 6 pages. So I'm going to go back one step. And just in case people don't know what the Marvel method is, it was basically back in the day, you would have a writer write out page descriptions. The artist would draw the page, and then the writer would come back in and fill in the dialogue. So I would do that with myself, where I would kind of have a brief outline, and then because my brain worked better seeing what it all looked like, I would lay it out, and then I would write in the dialogue. And then the layout might change at that point, but because I could see it, I had a better idea of what the dialogue could be. It was just this weird back and forth with myself, where because I wasn't used to the writing side, I would have to keep layering on, okay, this is what it looks like. Now here's some words. Okay, now I know what the words are, so I know what it looks like even more. And now I'm going to add some more words. And it was just this back and forth. And it was, luckily, I've managed to get past that a bit. I'll still, every so often, like in the script I'm working on right now, just like every 10 pages maybe, there's a quick doodle of a panel or a page layout. Because I was like, oh no, this is a good idea. I'm putting this in here. I want to remember this. But I don't necessarily need it to see what's happening. So that's, I think the first thing helped me get past that point, because now I can do that math in my head. One of the things that, let me get some water. that changed more recently in I guess it was this year. It was just pre-COVID, so I couldn't remember. That changed with my laying out comics process. This was for Dracula, because I started it like basically January 1st. Was I realized I wasn't working in a work for hire book anymore, so I didn't have to deal with ads. I was like, oh, I just have a graphic novel to myself. And so I started planning my pages out as spreads and not as single pages, because I was running again to my other comics deep dive. When you read a comic versus reading a book versus watching a movie, which are all kind of, ways of experiencing stories. So with a book, you open it up and you see a bunch of symbols, but you don't know what they are until you go through and read them. So seeing a bunch of words doesn't mean anything until you're going through line by line, and the story unfolds like that. And with a movie, you're experiencing it basically in real time. So if something's about to happen, you don't know it's about to happen, or at least, you don't see it. It's not in front of you. With a comic, you're seeing 2 pages worth of information at one time. And because it's visual, you know what's coming. Like, even if you can't read it right away, there's a certain amount that you take in just passively. So I started planning things out as spreads, because that's how you're going to be seeing it when it comes out. So even if, there was really only one double page spread in there, but I still wanted to see all of the panels next to each other, just to make sure it all worked. And, it's not like it wasn't extra work for me, because I'm still laying stuff out. I just realized that made more sense. And then thinking about that earlier this year helped me with writing stuff later this year, because it's made me think more about the page turn, which comes into that same idea where you want to hide big events on the next page. So one of the things that I do is I look at what each page is. Generally, you have, when you open a book, there's a blank page here, and then the page 1 is on the right. So left hand is always, left side, right side is going to be even and then odd. So I look at the number and see where I should be putting the panel at the end of the right-hand page before the turn that makes you want to turn the page, and then the interesting thing on the next page. So you have that anticipation. You always end it there, which you don't have to worry about if you're just writing a prose book. You're not going to get to half of a middle of a sentence and be like, well, I guess I need to figure out how to make someone keep going. But when there's something about that anticipation when you're looking at it as well that makes you want to keep moving forward. I've been keeping that in mind. So those have been some of the bigger changes in how I've been dealing with the storytelling and writing. I don't remember if there was more to that question, but I talked a lot, so.
No, that's great. That's great, actually, because there was a follow-up on how that I saw later, and you did how, so that was perfect.
Awesome.
Why did you decide to start doing moving to the writing side of comics?
Part of it is that there are things that I want to tell that I feel like I haven't been able to, or I didn't think I had the skill set to do. And when I've talked to other writers about, hey, do you want to do a story about X? They'll be like, yeah, that's cool, but what's in their head is different from what's in my head. And so that's always the cool part about collaboration, is that things change and blend, but sometimes you just want to do something yourself. It's largely about ownership. I want to be able to just put out what I want to put out. And I still like working with the people I like working with, but sometimes you just want to be greedy and keep all the little bits just being you. That's basically really it, is I just want to have full control. Just no one else touch my toys.
And how much writing have you done for other artists at this point, and what has that been like?
I think I've only ever written one page for someone else to draw, and it was fairly easy because it was kind of a jokey page, and it was Chip Zdarsky, who's already a friend of mine. And literally part of the page was just that it's going to devolve into something weird and funny, and I was going to leave it up to him because I know Chip. I'm sure that most people here are familiar with some of his work. So part of that was just, hey, Chip, do your thing, which as an artist, I've gotten that a few times, and it's always a combination of exciting and frustrating because you get to do whatever you want within the context, but then at the same time, it's like, oh, do your job. You have a job to do, and now I'm doing your job. So yeah, I don't have as much interest in just writing, so I haven't done a lot of that, but it's interesting because having to deal with an editor, and this rewrite I'm doing, it's on a script that a writer and I came up with together, and then he wrote, and now I'm rewriting it. So I still need to have other people be able to understand it. So in a way, it's kind of what I'm doing is similar. I just don't. I like the drawing side. I don't want someone else doing it.
So you mentioned part of getting into writing was so that you could have total control. So can you talk a little bit about some of what are some of your dream projects that you want to have that control on?
Right now, I'm not entirely sure. The main thing that I've talked to someone else about was something involving like Asian Americanness. Greg Pak and I have talked about it, and it was one of those things where, like, as we were talking about it, I was like, oh, we've had very different life experiences. And we could put together something that would be interesting. But if the reason I'm doing this is to get across my life experiences, blending our two things when they're so different, while it would probably still work, doesn't tell the sort of things that I want to tell. It doesn't express the kind of sentiments that I'm trying to figure out how to get out. So that's more where it is with that. I guess with the current thing that I'm rewriting, part of me wonders how much of it is me trying to wrest control and how much of it is genuine editing. So possibly that too, but that's kind of secret right now.
I have one question left, so I want to just put another call out for questions. But for the final question, are you working with other writers as well? And if so, what's that like? And how do you work together? I'm also assuming, I also did the distance collaboration panel with Ming and Tana. So it'd be interesting to kind of hear, we talked a bit about So how do you do this also from a distance? Like you can't sit in a room right now with your co-writer.
I don't think I've ever worked with someone who lived near me, or at least not when it came to writing. Like there was a tiny bit of collaboration when Joe Quinones and I did that crossover Howard the Duck Squirrel Girl story, but that was just drawing, and even then, like, we had to send each other files so that could be done from anywhere. A lot of times it just comes down to it's really about scheduling meetings. I know that sounds boring, but it's like, hey, when are you free? Can you do a phone call? Or like, hey, I just need to like get these ideas down, so I'm just gonna DM you or email. It's just the people that I work with are generally people that I like and get along with. Like I was lucky early in my career that I just got randomly placed with Ryan North and we were just like instantly became friends. And then after that point, I've been able to kind of pick and choose. So it's been nice because I can just say, oh, I like this person's writing, and also we're already friends. So we can just have like an email thread or just DM each other. Like right now, I've been talking to Daniel Kibblesmith, and there's just like the tiniest seed of an idea that we have down somewhere, and we just basically all it is right now is he sent me an email that basically was just titled, "This will be our thread for ideas." And neither of us has put anything in there yet, but that's how we're doing it for the moment. It's just, while we're doing other things, we're just gonna toss stuff in here. And then when we have more time, we'll sift through all this nonsense that we just sent each other. But yeah, really it's just about communication. It's just talking to the person who's there. Because even, there was a point where I didn't know Ryan. We still had to just email back and forth. And that's really it. Like, it's so rare to be able to sit down in the same room with someone. And even then, it's kind of the same idea. It's, hey, when do you have time to sit down in the same room together versus when do you have time for a phone call? So I actually don't remember the original question.
That's okay. No, you got it. You got it. Okay, so we have one more, and that will actually probably take us to time. So we're in good shape.
Okay.
After this question, you can take a couple minutes and promote some stuff and let people know where they can find you on social media and stuff like that. But the for real last question this time is, have you ever had a creative dry spell? And if so, what did you do in broad strokes to kind of get yourself out of it?
Well, at a certain point, when this is just your job, you kind of just have to keep trucking and hope that something happens. On the smaller end of things, sometimes you just need to not be doing anything creative. Like there are times where I'm just working on something and I know if I keep working on it, even though I have to be working on it, it's going to be bad and I'll have to redo it tomorrow. So on a day like that, just play a video game, just something that isn't creative thought, because you're just forcing it. And when you're forcing it, you kind of get frustrated with the process. And then the frustration of the process just leads to you not being able to do anything because you're just frustrated in general. Because now it's like, that's all you're doing. And now it's just frustration. And you just need to not be doing that. Sometimes if it's a particular thing that I'm having trouble with, I'll just do something else creative. So that's been one of the nice things about having my Patreon, is that part of my brain is always going, you need to put stuff in the Patreon. So if I don't want to be doing my work, I can kind of just do a fun thing for me and then tell myself, well, this was work because you need to put it in the Patreon. And so it's like this thing that I'm keeping in my head where it's like, well, you just need to do fun things for yourself because there's this little outlet for that just needs to keep getting filled up. You need to keep putting that stuff out there. So yeah, I mean, it's either just do something else creative if it's this particular thing, or literally stop thinking about the thing you're doing and just like read a book or play a game or go to bed. Because if it's not working, it's not working. And just getting mad at your work doesn't help anybody.
Good advice. So that actually does take us right to time. If you would like to, like I said, promote a couple things and let people know where they can find you on social media.
Yeah, coming out, I believe October 3rd is Dracula Mother F asterisk CKER. Can be found at Comicazi. And I can be found at Twitter, Instagram, Threadless, Patreon, at Erica Fails. ERICAFAILS. No one else wanted that name, which is very useful to me because a lot of people have Erica Henderson something or other.